In today's video, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to go into SKOOL, into some of the biggest SMMA groups and agency groups in SKOOL, and I'm going to answer the questions that got left behind, the downtrodden, the damned, because sometimes those questions are the ones that everyone asks and the owners of the groups just don't get time to answer them. So I'm here to help. I'm going to do my best to give you guys some answers. For those who don't know who I am, my name is Uncle Jimmy. That's what everyone calls me. I've been running my agency, My Online Guy, now for over 8 years, and I help people with service delivery and scaling their marketing agencies. And this is my little group here. If you want to join that, I'm pretty proud to say that I pretty much go in and answer every single question, which is what we're going to go and do in some of these other groups to try and help some people out. So let's just get straight into it. The first group I'm going to look at here is probably one of the biggest ones out there, which is the agency owners group. So let's go into here. Okay, so we're going to start with this question I just found from Mustafa. How to know if leads are good quality? If I generate leads for my client and should I talk to them or make the business owner take the call? Because if it should be me, I don't know enough about the business itself to say the company niche. So if the leads ask me about something that I don't know how to do it or don't know how to answer it, that will put them off and they'll think that the company doesn't know what they're doing. This is a great question. It pops up all the time in my coaching call. So Mustafa, I'm going to give you my answer to this. So you need to think of appointment setting on behalf of your client as triage. It's a little bit like, the battlefield, right? So on the battlefield, you have medics, and those medics' job is to bandage people up, stabilize them enough to take them to the field hospitals on the battlefield, right? So you have the medics that are running around, picking people off the battlefield on stretchers, taking them to an aid station or a medical unit where there's more qualified and skilled people that can do that. So your job is actually to not necessarily answer those questions. Your job is to make sure that they're the right team. You're not picking up the enemy and taking them in your stretcher, and you need to also make sure that they're ready and for the person that is going to do the specialist stuff on them, so that the surgeon or the doctor. So if we think about it in the context of SMMA and the carpenter niche, you may have someone calling up and going, you qualify, you're starting to qualify them, you ask them about the size of their house, you ask them about when they want to do the job, you ask them a bit about the job, and then if they ask the specific, like, oh, what's your square meter? You go, just say this, go, look, that's a fantastic question. I don't want to give you misinformation. You're actually better off talking to John, and John is the expert at this. He's the one that's actually going to be doing the job, and he can give you a much better response. Am I able to patch you through to John, or am I able to get John to give you a call back in, say, 20 minutes or half an hour? That's all you have to do, man. You don't have to pretend to know the answer to those questions. Your job is just to make sure that they have a house, they want to get carpentry job done soon, and the size of the job and things like that. Your job is not to go into the specifics with them because it's too risky to give them misinformation. And in an ideal world, you would actually get the client to do the qualification because it actually makes your life easier, but it does make their life harder. And then the only negative of that is you're relying on their ability to close calls out and qualify for you to get paid, because I've seen a lot with the clients that I work with, as in the SMMAs I work with, where they get the owner of the business to do the qualification because they think it's better to have the doctor run onto the battlefield, grab the patients and run off with them. But what tends to happen is they're not as good at they're not as good at qualifying as you are. And so they start thinking that the lead quality is bad. And then because of that, they start blaming you, and then you get into the issues and them not wanting to potentially pay. So that's the answer to that question, Mustafa. Hopefully it helps. Let's move on to the next one. All right, so this question was actually fairly well answered, but I want to give you my opinion just because I've been in the space a very long time. So Hassan has asked why SMMA is declining. If you check Google Trends analysis, it's just shocked me how much SMMA got popularity at the start of 2023 and now gradually declining over time. It seemed like SMMA dues are going to the valley of despair. What do you think? Is it still worth getting into SMMA in 2024? Let me know your feedback. Yeah, it's a great question. It's not a good situation if you're trying to sell courses and information to SMMAs, but it's an excellent opportunity if you're an SMMA and you want to get clients, because generally what happens is as influencers and as the bros in the space start to move towards a product or a service or an analogy or some kind of thing, let's say it's SMMA in 2023, when Hamza and Imran Gaji and everyone and Man and his dog were saying SMMA is a really good way to make money, there was a lot of interest in that. Now, the interest doesn't come from businesses searching SMMA, right? It comes from people wanting to start SMMAs searching SMMA, because you got to think about how a business would find a marketing agency. They might search Facebook ads agency. They're not going to search SMMA because a lot of them don't even know what that bloody means, right? It's a term that was coined up by the space. You think about it, if the demand for people starting SMMAs is going down. It doesn't mean the supply of businesses that those SMMAs serve is going down as well. You need to separate the two. The way I look at this is that it's actually a really good thing if you are wanting to get in the space, because there's less people wanting to start SMMAs, which means that over time, from this point on, there'll be less competition, as the SMMA agencies that exist at the moment that were doing it as a way of making lots of money really quick start to disappear out of the marketplace. So I see it as a really good opportunity. And look, to be completely fair, I've been hearing this pretty much every year since I've started, and it's been almost a decade now, and it's still going strong. There's always going to be people saying that it's dying and it's dead, but if you look at it pragmatically and remove the confirmation bias that you get by being in the space, all this means is that there's some new thing. It's AI at the moment. I reckon if you searched AI automation agencies, it would have picked up the slack of SMMA. So all the people that want to get rich quick are moving into that space, and all that's left are people that are wanting to do good work and build careers and build businesses in this space. There's less SMMAs now, and over time there's going to be less and less, and there's only going to be more and more businesses that need the support. So I think it's a great opportunity. Hassan, I wouldn't be too worried about that. If anything, it just makes life harder for the people that are selling courses and information to SMMAs. So let's get into the next question here. So Reva's asked this question: how many DMs should I be sending out a day in order to get a client? I've been trying to send out DMs on Instagram to potential clients and not getting any response. And I'm just assuming that I need to send out more DMs, but I'm not sure how many. Yeah, it's hard to know how many you should be sending out if I don't know how many you've been sending. That's a big factor, because if you're sending, because it changes the advice that someone gives you. That's probably why no one's answered this. If you're sending out 500 DMs a day right now and you're not getting a response, then maybe it's actually what you're saying in the DMs that's the issue and not necessarily the volume. But if you're sending out 10 a day, well then of course people are going to say you need to send out more. It's just natural. So it really depends on how many you're sending out. And if you're sending out, say, more than 250 a day across multiple accounts, then I would say it's got a lot to do with what you're saying in the Instagram DMs. So if you wanted to post that in here, if you watch this, I can give you a bit of advice once I see your DM, maybe give you some advice on what to change. If you're only sending 5, 10, if you're sending less than 50 a day across 2 accounts, then send more. You need to be sending more. It's a numbers game, especially when it comes to cold outreach. It doesn't matter if it's DMs, LinkedIn outreach, cold emails, cold calling. It's a volume game. The more times you pick up the phone, the more chances you have of closing a client. That's just the math of it. You can do things to make those numbers better by having better quality scripts and better quality like DM outreach approaches, but it doesn't change the fact that volume beats everything. All right, let's move on to the next question here. So this is a great question. This comes from Aris about media buyers. In terms of percentage of charge to the clients, what is the most I should be paying a media buyer? I'm thinking that after a media buyer, usually around $200, and the ad spend $3 to $5, I'm going to have to reduce profit margins. Yeah, unfortunately, that's the way it is. There's a big misconception in the SMMA space, and it's been propagated by guys like Imran Gaji. Sorry, I'm calling you out, bro. The advice you give people on this is actually terrible. To tell people to get a client then hire a media buyer without knowing how to do the ads themselves is actually terrible advice. And I've got a video on that if you want to know why that is. But this is part and parcel of the reason you want to do that. A good media buyer will cost you $30, $50, $70 an hour if they're good. If you're talking about a media buyer that's full stack, that can develop the ads themselves, can automate, can optimize and do that efficiently and come up with out-of-the-box ideas that will get really good results and be committed to it, you're talking about a media buyer that's very expensive. Now, most agencies, when they're starting out, cannot afford a media buyer. That's part of the reason why you should be doing it yourself. And the reason you should be doing it yourself is so that you can train someone like a general VA to do elements of media buying so that you can do the zone of genius stuff like creating the ads because you've learned how to do them and you've got the fundamentals down. You can learn how to do that. And then all the other stuff that can make you more efficient by giving it off to someone else that anyone can do. Let's say, for instance, like going into clients' accounts every day and checking the key stats and the key KPIs. Anyone can do that. It takes 10 minutes, but if you think about that across 5 clients, that's 50 minutes in a day that you could be spending to grow your business if you didn't have to do it. So your best bet is to do the stuff that is really expensive for you to hire for. You should be doing that for as long as possible. And then what you should be doing is like peeling off the stuff around the outside that anyone can do, and then hiring a general VA for $3 an hour to do that stuff. And the best analogy for this is actually surgeons, right? If you're a private surgeon, you are mad if you only work in one surgery with one operating theatre. Most private surgeons the ones that you see driving around in yachts and Bugattis and things like that, they actually have practices that have 4 to 6 operating theatres, and all they do in the morning is they go in, scrub up, and then they have a nursing team at each one of those operating theatres, and they're working on 6 people at the same time. There's only certain things a surgeon has to do in an operation. Let's say it's a breast implant. They literally just have to put the breast implant in there because a surgeon legally has to do that. Everything else, from anesthetizing them, opening them up, closing them, the prep work, the post care, can be done by someone else that doesn't cost as much as the surgeon. And so a surgeon literally walks around all day, puts them in, and does 30 surgeries that way, and each one of those is worth $10,000. That's how you get a really specialized skill, and you do it at scale. So we need to think the same way. If you're the surgeon in this case, because you can't afford a surgeon, you need to basically build a team around you that does all the stuff that you don't have, that only you, they do all the stuff that they can do, that can be done by anyone, and you do the things that are the super expensive part of, say, media buying, and they do everything around you. Because yeah, you're right, like, you're going to hire a media buyer for $200. They're going to be working with 15 people. And if it doesn't work for you, as in like you kick up a stink or they don't get your results, they'll drop you, because it's a scale game for them. They're trying to run a successful business as well. And then $300 to $500 ad spend doesn't leave much in the way of margin for you after you pay them. Yeah, that's my opinion, Yaris. Like I said, I would have highly advised you to watch the video I've got on why not to hire a media buyer, because it might give you a little bit more clarification on this. But yeah, don't hire a media buyer when you first start. Learn how to do the ads. You don't have to be an expert at it, but just learn how to do the ads, and then hire people around you that are $3 an hour, $5 an hour to do all the bits. Free up more of your time so you can focus on generating revenue. All right, let's go on to the next question here. So this has come from Raghu. I'm looking forward to starting an SMMA, and I'm going to ask generic questions which might help others in the beginning too. So I'd love some pointers, do's or don'ts, advices, and help from veterans or fellow beginners like me. Happy to put my hat in the ring. I don't know if I can answer them all though. Let's have a look. So the first question, as a newbie SMMA, is SMMA still advisable without social media experience? Yeah, of course. I only just mentioned that before. Like, the shine has come off SMMA, so all the people that are just flashing in the pan, making the space unworkable, are starting to leave. That's going to leave a supply-demand gap. The amount of businesses that need SMMAs hasn't changed. If anything, there's more businesses started. So yeah, it's a highly advisable. And it's a really good way to learn core skills that will help you in any business that you start after this. Knowing how to do marketing and doing marketing effectively is one of the core skills outside of sales that develops 9-figure businesses, 10-figure businesses. So if you know how to do marketing, even if you don't have prior experience, it's going to be very, very, very handy, hard skill to know as you get older. And how do I go about learning Facebook advertising and TikTok/Instagram? Your actual best way to learn Facebook advertising is to get a client and work on a client. You can do a lot of theory before you get a client, but trust me when I say you're going to be going straight back to the videos that you watched to learn how to do it again. And my advice would be to just tackle it section by section. So as you get into Facebook, you're going to look at an interface and have no idea what any of it is. And then what you want to do is you want to start at the very top. So you're going to go create a campaign, and there's going to be a whole bunch of things in there. So go and find a YouTube video on how to set up a campaign. Then go and find a video on how to set up an ad set. Go and find a video on how to set up an ad. Go and find a video on how to write copy. Go find a video on how to write creative lead forms. Just follow the bouncing ball through it, and then just keep reverting back to YouTube. The thing is, you don't need a course to learn how to do ads. Before the whole course thing existed in the last 5 years, the proliferation of them, that's how we all learned how to do it, was just going on YouTube and watching other people and trial and error, basically. So you're going to learn way more about Instagram, TikTok, Facebook advertising by just getting a client and doing it in real time. How much minimum initial capital must I have in order to get started? I would highly recommend at least $500. Now, people say you can do this with $0. There's incidental costs that you have to take into account. You can't, just like little things. If you want to do cold calling, you need like a Skype number at least. If you want to do DM outreach, you need the tools to be able to create counts of scale, things like that. So I would say $500, and there's a lot of people out there that say, oh, I don't have $500 to start this. I call BS on that. You've probably got a PS5, you've probably got bits and pieces laying around, you've got someone in your local neighborhood that you can help out. You can scrape together $500. And if you can't scrape together $500 because maybe you're in a third world country, well, then you probably don't need as much cost You probably don't need as much overhead to start if you're starting in a third world country. I just can't speak to that. How would you go about picking a niche? Do I freestyle it or slow ball it to whatever I serve best? I highly recommend not freestyling it. You really need to decide on a niche before you start, because that defines the strategy you take going forward. So yeah, I wouldn't freestyle it. What I would do is, I've got a video on niches. You can watch that. It's in my channel. But basically my cliff notes would be pick a high ticket, low volume niche, because it scales a lot better. You don't need as many resources to service, say, a roofer than you do, say, a plumber, just because there's less throughput through your lead system. So it's less, there's less labor involved. But yeah, high ticket, low volume. I would talk about a high decision cycle. Just off the top of my head, some really good niches. Roofing is one. Landscaping, HVAC, aircon, they're the ones you see all the time, but there's a reason for that. But yeah, watch the video on that if you're serious about learning more about that. What are the main resources I must refer to? Obviously, my Service Delivery Kings free service delivery group. I'm going to give that a plug there. That's there pretty actively, and it's a pretty awesome little community we got going. YouTube is your main one. Just watch YouTube. There's plenty of information out there. There's a lot of people that are really trying to create good content out there. You just got to find those. Stay away from the Imungajis, stay away from the Hamzas, the people that are just trying to sell you on the dream, and get people that are actually getting into the weeds and showing you practical skills that will help you. And what are some rookie errors that people have made that you would give advice to watch out for? Dude, trying to scale too quick, not setting expectations with your clients are the two killers of agencies. You need to set expectations with your clients appropriately. If you don't do that, you will run into trouble and you will crash and burn at some point. And then scaling too quickly without processes. There's a lot of guys that are trying to speed run to 7 figures or speed run to 10K. Slow down, get to a stasis point where you're paying yourself and you are servicing your clients, and you got like this stasis point you could effectively stay in forever. Stay at that until you got some processes in place, and then scale up. All right, let's move on to the next one. I'm gonna go back a bit. These ones have all been recent questions. Let's go to page 5. That's like the second page of Google. No one answers questions out here. Okay, let's have a look. All right, Hinad, I'm here to help. What do you include paid ads? Do you include paid ads in your pricing? Agency owners, do you include paid ads cost in your pricing packages when reaching out to small clients? Or do you only charge a service fee? How do you make sure the client will spend on paid ads? Yeah, you never cover the costs of the paid ads for your client unless they prepay you in advance. The reason for that is that if they decide they don't want to pay you, you're left holding the bag, and it's basically uncollateralized debt, and it's not good because it's very hard to get it out of the client if you've already paid for it. Your leverage is the fact that they've got to pay for it themselves. So I would highly recommend that the client pays for their own ad spend, and they put their own credit card details into their own Facebook account. You don't handle that. So you charge a service fee on top of that. You got to remember that what we do as marketers is like any other professional services. It's like being a lawyer, it's like being an accountant. We charge for labor, right? Which, yes, the outcome and the facade is results, but what they're actually paying for is the labor to generate those leads. What they're paying for is the labor to generate that appointment. Now, we don't package it like that, but it's the same way a lawyer charges $400 an hour to do research. Effectively, we're doing the same model. So you're charging a service fee on top of whatever you do for the client. And how do you make sure that the client will spend on paid ads? You can't. But because you're charging for the labor, it should be proportionate to the amount of work you're putting in. You should be charging enough margin to cover for a 30% difference in ad spend, or an 80% of difference in ad spend. So for me, admittedly, I've been around a lot longer, so I have a different structure to most, but we charge a flat retainer plus, so a flat fee plus percentage of ad spend. So for us, say for instance, it's going to be say $4.95 a month minimum, and then or 20% of ad spend, whichever is higher. So it's always a minimum of $495, but it might be $2,000 if they spend more, if that makes sense. That's how we charge, but there's no way to guarantee that they're going to spend on that. And you just need to make sure you have a floor in your ad spend charges, like your service fee. You have a floor so that you've covered your labor costs of doing the work plus a margin. All right, let's move on to the next question. All right, I can keep going back in time. A lot of the ones that haven't had any questions answered now are just spam. So let's move on to the next group and see what we can get answered here. So the next group I'm going to go into is Self-Mastery, which is Cameron England's group. Good friend. Go and check out his group if you haven't. But let's go and see if there's any questions here that haven't been answered. So Noah asks, Facebook ads can't exit learning phase or are limited. Hey, our clients' ads simply won't exit learning phase limited on Facebook due to not getting 50 optimization events, which for us is leads over instant forms in a week. I'm getting about 4 leads a day, which was enough, but now we're getting 1 to 2 for 2 weeks. We've already raised the budget by 25%. We combined with the ad set into one, but nothing helps. Maybe will I try to go into messenger ads instead of through Insta forms, but I'm not sure if that will help. Yeah, this is a great question, Noah, and it's a common misconception with Facebook ads. I've got campaigns that have been running in learning phase and have had learning limited for years. It's all it's saying when a campaign is in learning limited mode is that there is a constraint there that it doesn't have enough data to fully optimize the campaign. It doesn't mean it isn't optimizing it at all. That's why it's a yellow warning box, not a red one, because it's not a deal breaker. That's the way I look at it and understand it. So you can't physically change the constraints that are put on you as a marketer, right? So if your client only has 10,000 addressable people in its market, well, you can't magically make 100,000 people appear. So you got to work within those constraints. Yeah, ideally you want to be out of learning mode and you don't want learning to be limited, but it isn't the end of the world if it is. Trust me when I say that it's still working in the background and it's still generating leads. Now, I feel like I get the feeling that you're doing this because your lead flow has dropped in the last 2 weeks. That's probably something that needs to be addressed outside of the whole learning limited. The learning limited probably won't be helping, but it won't be the root cause of why that lead flow dropped. So I would be investigating, has my click-through rate dropped over time? Has my frequency increased? What's my click-through at all? Has that gone up or down? What has been the average conversion rate over the last 2 weeks? Go and look at that stuff. Set your segments daily, go through it and just double check to see where you're sitting. If there's something that's dropped down over or increased over the last 2 weeks, go and investigate that as a good starting point and then adjust your ads according to that. All right, let's try and find another one here. So Sam's asked here, team tracking. What do you guys use for tracking hours? Any good software? Yeah, I highly recommend Toggle, especially if you're new. Toggle works really well because you can assign the time to clients. One of the biggest things people don't do when they track time is that they don't assign the time to clients. So they don't know how long it takes for each client to service each client. And you need to know that number from a capacity standpoint so you can determine if you're making money from a client. If you're not making money from them, you shouldn't be working from them or you should be charging them more. So it's not necessarily about tracking the hours. You've got to do something with those numbers. That's the big one. So Toggle works really well because it's really simple to use. It's cheap and anyone can log in and use it, which is good. And then it's just about training your team to use Toggle as well. And it's a good gut check because trust me when I say if you've got like 10 clients, there'll be one that's not worth having. And then you need to have that conversation with them and determine whether you want to increase what you charge them or whether you want to drop them like a sack of shit and move on. But yeah, you won't know that unless you know how much time your team is charging to a client, and Toggle does a really good job of that. A little bit of setup in the back end, you've got to put each client in there and set them up. But once you do that, it's pretty easy to use. So I'd recommend toggle.com, TOGL.com. All right, let's keep going. Okay, so this is a fantastic question. I'm going to end on this, and this is maintaining work-life balance, and it's asked by Michael. Can someone please help me on how to balance my personal and professional life as a founder? This is a really good question, and it's taken me a long time, and I don't even know if I'm still there, but I'm going to give you some perspective on that because it's really important. When you're young, your perception of what work-life balance is completely different to when you're older. So when you're young, your perception of work-life balance is like working from whatever X to Y, then going out, maybe partying and having a good relationship outside of work. What I've found the best way to maintain work-life balance is to have a hobby that is nothing to do with the internet. And especially if you're working on the internet, spending all day on here, what can happen is if your hobby is, say, computer games, and you want to maintain a work-life balance, all of a sudden you're playing computer games and you're thinking about something that could be done in the agency, and next thing you're struggling to sleep and things like that. The way you maintain a good work-life balance is to have a hobby outside of the internet. That's what I found. So whether it's the gym or whether it's playing with trains, building models, whatever, you got to have a hobby outside of the internet. And you also need to set very strict timelines on when you work. That is the actual secret. So you need to go, I'm going to work from 9 till 3 p.m. and then I shut my computer or I don't do anything when it comes to work. If I have something that I need to do on work, I make a note of it and I do it the next day. Not only does that force you to have the work-life balance, but it also makes it so that you have constraint which forces you to work quicker during those times, especially if you believe it. If you can get your subconscious to believe that the computer goes off philosophically at 3 p.m. for work, then you will start to work quicker in the time that you have. What I found is there's a lot of guys that are saying I work 15 hours a day, and all they do is they spend 3 hours actually working, the other 12 just looking busy. So that's the digital equivalent of picking up a broom and just sweeping the floor for the sake of sweeping it. They'll go on YouTube, they'll watch videos, and they'll think they're learning things, but actually they're just distracting themselves from doing the actual work. Whereas if I told you, if we were living in a third world country or something, and I told you the power was going to go out at 8 p.m. at night, and it's 5 o'clock, and I told you that power is going to go out at 8 p.m. and you have no control of that, you will not be able to do any work. Trust me when I say you will do more in that 3 hours than you will possibly ever imagine is possible. It's the same as if you get told, oh, you've got to get all your homework done in an hour, then you can go and play Xbox. It's amazing how quickly you do your homework when you've got the constraint. So you need to force yourself to have the constraint. I think it's a massive myth that people should be working 12, 15, 16 hours a day because A, most people aren't effective with that time, and B, as you get older and you have family and children, you just can't do that practically. So you need to like prep your life for what you're going to have in the future and where you want it to be. And if you get into this habit of working 20 hours a day and then you find a woman that finds that acceptable, next thing in 6 hours of that, she's off rooting some other dude. Like it's that bad. So you need to like make sure that you put artificial constraints in. You really force yourself to like clock on and clock off at a certain time and then have a hobby outside of work. They have been the strategies that work pretty well for me, but I am still learning this. I'm going to be completely vulnerable and still bad when it comes to like work-life balance. It frustrates my wife to no end, but it's because I really enjoy what I do and I enjoy being on the internet and learning things. It's hard to turn that off even when I'm not supposed to be in front of a computer, but hopefully that helps you, Michael. And hopefully these questions have helped all of you. If you want me to do a series, videos like this and just going through and finding questions that you want answered, let me know. If you want me to answer your questions, the best place to do that is actually in our SKOOL group, which is Agency Service Scaling Kings. You'll see that I pretty much answer every single person's question with a Loom video, just because I just feel like if you're going to take the time to join this group, I want to give you the time of day. So yeah, make sure to join this group if you want to, and also make sure to subscribe. So I'm Uncle Jimmy, and I'll catch you in the next video.